There are some names that just seem to echo through history, right? They pop up in ancient scriptures, and then boom, they're suddenly all over today's wildest conspiracy theories. Well, one of those names is Baal, and trust me, digging into its journey from an ancient god to a modern-day conspiracy keyword, it tells us a lot more about our own time than you might think. So, you've got to ask yourself, why? Why does this ancient name still haunt the modern world? I mean, how does a deity worshipped thousands of years ago suddenly become this major buzzword when we're talking about power, control, and secret societies in the 21st century? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to connect the dots, all the way from the ancient world to what's happening right now.
I mean, seriously, go online today and just type in BAAL. The stuff you'll find is, well, it's pretty shocking. You'll see the name linked to global elites, you'll see it mentioned with the whole Epstein scandal, and you'll definitely hear it whispered in theories about forbidden black magic and these secret power rituals. It honestly sounds like something straight out of a movie, but for a lot of people, this isn't fiction. These are headlines.
But look, to really get a grip on any of these modern claims, we can't just stay here in the present. We have to go back, way back. We need to cut through all the noise and speculation and find out where this story actually begins, back when the name Baal meant something completely different.
All right, so let's start at the very beginning, from master to a god, the origin story. Before all the idols, before the conspiracies, there was just a word. So how did this one simple word morph into one of the most infamous names in all of history? You might be surprised to hear the answer is actually kind of boring.
See, Baal wasn't originally the name of some big, scary deity. Not at all. It was just a regular word. In ancient Semitic languages, it just meant master, owner, or lord. It was a title, a sign of respect. You might have called your town leader a Baal, or you could even use it to refer to a husband. It was totally normal, completely ordinary.
So how on earth do you get from a simple, everyday word to a whole corrupt system? Well, it looks like it happened in about 5 steps. First, you have the word, just a simple title. Then that word becomes an idea, the idea of a provider, a master who brings the rain and makes the crops grow. From there, people create an idol to give that idea a physical form. And of course, an idol needs rituals, a way to worship it. And that's the last step. Those rituals turn into an entire system, a whole structure of power designed to control society.
Okay, so now we're getting into the system of power, which was all about fear, control, and sacrifice. And yeah, this is where the story takes a really dark turn. The worship of Baal wasn't just some private, personal belief. Oh no, it became a full-blown political system. And its foundations were fear, absolute control, and terrifying sacrifice.
So who was running this whole operation? Well, at its peak, you had rulers like King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, and they made Baal worship the official state religion. Think about that. They had 450 priests of Baal on the government payroll. These guys were basically state-funded influencers, shaping what the entire society believed. And the king? He was seen as Baal's man on earth, his representative. So for the average person, your life was just this constant tightrope walk between hoping for a blessing and being terrified of punishment.
And look, this system worked because the promise was so tempting. It offered rain, a good harvest, wealth, success, power, everything people desperately wanted. But the price was just staggering. It demanded constant fear. It demanded absolute control. It demanded animal sacrifices. And in its most horrific forms, historical accounts say it demanded the ultimate price, sacrificing your own children, burned in fire, all to please a statue. And it was right into the middle of this dark, powerful system that one man stood up and challenged everything. The Quran tells us about Prophet Elias. You might know him as Elijah from the Bible, who walked up to his people and asked this incredibly simple but world-shattering question. Do you call upon Baal and leave the best of creators? He wasn't just taking on a statue. He was taking on the entire system of fear and control that it stood for. This brings us to a really clear warning from the Quran about this confrontation and a test. The account there gives us this crucial perspective. It's not just a history lesson. It's framed as a major spiritual test for all of us.
What's really interesting is that the people Prophet Elias was sent to, they weren't atheists. They knew about Allah, the one creator. The problem was they had kind of split up their faith in a really dangerous way. They thought of Allah as this distant cosmic god, But for their day-to-day needs like rain, crops, success, Their go-to was Baal. They were trying to have it both ways, mixing true monotheism with idol worship. But this is where the story gets even deeper. Where does magic fit into all of this? Well, that desire to control things, to manipulate the world to get what you want, that's the exact same impulse that leads people down another forbidden path, magic. Both are really about the same thing, trying to find a shortcut to power that bypasses God. And the Quran gives us this really powerful cautionary tale to illustrate the danger. It's a story from ancient Babylon about two angels, Harut and Marut. And here's the twist. They were sent to Earth not to teach good things, but to be a direct test for all of humanity.
So what were they teaching? They were teaching something called sihr, which is basically forbidden knowledge, or what we'd call magic. And it was presented purely as a trial, a temptation designed to see who would fall into disbelief. And what was it used for? Mostly for harm, like causing a split between a husband and wife.
Now, this is the most important part of the story. The angels warned every single person who came to them. They said flat out, "We are only a test, so do not disbelieve." They couldn't have made the stakes any clearer. But some people still chose to learn. They saw the giant red warning sign, but they were so hungry for that forbidden power that they just walked right past it, choosing the shortcut instead of divine guidance.
So all of this ancient history, this entire system of trading faith for power, it brings us right back to where we started. This is the echo. This is why the symbol of Baal still lingers today. And it's the context we absolutely need to understand why this name is still echoing through our modern world. Okay, so with all that history in mind, let's look at those modern reports. People who follow these theories point to a couple of specific, documented things. One is a wire transfer document that has the phrase Baal name on it. Another thing they point to are email records from 2017 that mention a shipment of framed pieces of the Kiswa, that's the sacred cloth that covers the Kaaba and Mecca, being sent to Jeffrey Epstein. And this brings us to the single most important question here. Does a documented mention of a name or an object actually prove a black magic ritual? We have a couple of documented data points, but is that enough to jump to these huge conclusions about secret rituals? This is where we have to be really, really careful to separate what we know from what we assume. And right here is where the evidence ends and the speculation begins. We have a name on a document. We have an email about a sacred object being sent to a truly corrupt person. And yeah, that's deeply disturbing, no question. But that feeling, that disturbance, is not by itself proof of a specific ritual taking place. So at the end of the day, whether we're talking about ancient history or modern conspiracy theories, the name Baal really just points to the same timeless human temptation, doesn't it? It's about that willingness to trade real faith for the promise of worldly power, security, and control. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. The ancient system of Baal was built on trading faith for power, security, and control. So, what are the Baals of our time? What are the things we're tempted to worship today in exchange for those very same promises?